The clock hit 4:45 p.m., and the courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. 15 minutes left before a German shepherd named Ace was put down by court order. The judge's gavel sat ready. The animal control officer stood frozen, syringe trembling in his hand. And between them, a 10-year-old girl, small, shaking, but unmovable. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "If he dies, I die too." That single sentence cracked something inside every person watching. Outside the courthouse, snow fell over downtown Aspen, Colorado, where 5 million people tuned into the live stream. Inside, Ethan Rowe, a billionaire tech mogul with more money than peace, clenched his fists and stared at the dog that once saved his life, and now might lose his own. No one in that courtroom knew how this child with secondhand boots and a stuffed bear in her pocket, had crossed 100 miles of mountain snow to stand there. To understand that, you'd have to go back 30 days. Back to the first snowfall of December, when everything began to unravel. Ethan Rowe's house stood like a frozen monument to wealth and grief. A $45 million glass mansion built on a mountainside overlooking Aspen. He hadn't stepped outside in nearly 2 years. Not since the avalanche that buried his wife Megan, alive and left him with nothing but regret, and a bookie that refused to be touched. Down in the basement, behind a steel door and reinforced glass, Ace lay curled in the corner of his enclosure. 5 years old, 95 pounds of pure German Shepherd muscle, the kind of dog bred for loyalty, for service, for courage. Once, Ace had been the hero of a mountain rescue team. Now his fur was dull, his ribs too sharp, and his eyes empty. They said he was dangerous, unfixable, a ticking lawsuit. Ethan knew better. Ace wasn't dangerous, he was broken, just like his owner. The third professional trainer had been taken away in an ambulance that morning. The bite wounds were deep, the blood on the floor was real, and the court order was clear. If Ethan couldn't prove Ace could be rehabilitated within 30 days, the dog would be euthanized. No exceptions. Ethan watched the surveillance footage on his office monitor again and again. The trainer, Mark Hensley, had done everything right, until he made the one mistake that no one could have predicted. He'd worn the same cologne the avalanche rescue team used the night Megan died. Bergamot and cedar. The scent alone had ripped Ace back into the moment of trauma. The roar of snow, the screams, the helplessness of watching her die. In seconds, the calm, obedient shepherd became a nightmare of fear and fury. When Ethan burst into the basement, Ace was standing over the man, trembling, snarling, lost in a memory he couldn't escape. "Ace, no!" Ethan shouted. The dog turned. For a moment, recognition flickered. His ears drooped. The monster vanished. He backed into the corner, whimpering as paramedics rushed in. That night, when the sheriff came to take statements, Ethan already knew what was coming. "This is the third attack, Ethan," Sheriff Alan Pierce said quietly. "I can't hold off the court any longer." The next morning, the judge signed the euthanasia order, with one condition: 30 days to prove Ace could be saved. 30 days to heal what no professional could. The video went live at 11 o'clock p.m. p.m. that night. Ethan sat in his dimly lit study, a photograph of Megan on his desk beside him. He looked straight into the camera, his voice raw. "This is Ace. 3 years ago, he saved my life. Now the courts say he's beyond saving. I don't believe that. I'm offering $1 million to anyone who can reach him. Not control him, not dominate him, heal him." The video exploded overnight. 50 million views in less than 24 hours. News anchors debated it. Psychologists condemned it. Animal lovers cheered it. Hashtags trended. Hashtag save Ace. But behind every click, every comment, Ethan saw only one thing: the hope that someone out there might understand what he couldn't fix. Meanwhile, 100 miles away, in a women's shelter outside Denver, Lily Carter was watching that same video on a flickering TV. She sat cross-legged on a worn couch, her fingers clutching the stuffed bear her father had given her before the wildfire took him. The girl's boots were held together with duct tape. Her mother, Grace, was still at the hospital, finishing her third nursing shift in 24 hours. On the screen, Ethan's voice cracked. "If someone can help him, please, he doesn't deserve to die for being afraid." Lily leaned closer. The dog in the video wasn't a monster. She knew that look, the look of something terrified of its own memories. She'd seen it in her dad's eyes before he stopped recognizing her. The women around her in the shelter laughed. "That dog should be put down," one muttered, but Lily whispered to her bear, "He's not mean, he's just scared." That night, while her mother slept, Lily wrote a note on a scrap of paper. "Mom, I'm going to help the dog. Don't worry, I'll be safe. I love you." By dawn, she was gone, walking along a snow-choked highway with $23, a stuffed bear, and a determination the size of the Rockies. Truck drivers gave her rides. Old couples fed her soup. A stranger bought her gloves at a gas station. When someone asked, "You running away from something?" she smiled softly. "No, sir, running toward something." By the time she reached the gates of the Rowe estate 3 days later, her cheeks were windburned, her lips cracked, her hands trembling. She pressed the intercom button. "This is private property," a guard's voice said. "I'm here for the challenge," she answered. A pause, then laughter. "Kid, go home." "I don't have a home." Inside, Ethan watched the security feed. The girl on his monitor looked like she'd walked through a blizzard, because she had. Something about her eyes, green and defiant, made him open the gate. He met her in the circular driveway, snow swirling around them. "How old are you?" he asked. 10. "And your parents?" "My mom's working. My dad's gone." He should have called child services. He should have sent her away, but he didn't. When they stepped inside, Ace lifted his head in the basement below. For the first time in 3 years, the dog didn't growl when a stranger entered. That night, Lily sat at Ethan's dining table eating more food than she'd seen in months. Between bites, she said, "My dad was a forest ranger. He taught me that herd animals aren't bad. They're just scared." Ethan studied her, half amused, half haunted. "Rangers and billionaires don't usually mix," he said. "Guess today's different." Downstairs, Ace paced behind his glass wall, restless. His amber eyes followed Lily's voice from the vents above, soft and curious. Something about that sound, hope maybe, stirred the faintest flicker of memory. Midway call to action, naturally blended. If you're watching this story unfold and you believe dogs deserve second chances, too, make sure you hit subscribe to Animal Heroes, because Ace's fight for life is just beginning, and what happens next will break your heart before it heals it. The following morning, Lily stood barefoot in the observation room, staring at the steel door to the kennel. Ethan hesitated beside her. "You really think you can reach him?" She nodded. "Not if I'm afraid." She stepped inside before anyone could stop her. The door sealed behind her with a hiss. Ace stood in the corner, muscles tight, ears back, every line of his body screaming danger. Lily sat down on the cold concrete, cross-legged, her bear clutched in her lap. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just began to hum. The sound filled the sterile air like a memory, the same tune Megan used to sing during thunderstorms. Ace's growl faded, his ears twitched. He took one step closer, then another. When Lily pushed her stuffed bear across the floor toward him, her voice was a whisper. "For you, so you know someone cares." Ace sniffed it, recognizing a scent he hadn't smelled in years. Lavender and vanilla. Megan's scent. He sat down. For the first time since the avalanche, the dangerous dog didn't attack. He simply sat and stared at the girl who refused to be afraid. Through the observation glass, Ethan's hands trembled. Something inside him cracked open. Something that had been frozen since the day he buried his wife. For the first time in years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything broken has to stay that way. Ethan watched from behind the reinforced glass, arms folded tight across his chest as Lily sat motionless on the cold concrete floor. Inside the enclosure, Ace paced slowly in the corner like a prisoner on death row, every muscle tight with distrust. His amber eyes flicked between her and the door. Lily didn't speak, didn't make a sound. She sat cross-legged, back straight, her father's old stuffed bear tucked into her lap like it was sacred. Just being in the same room with Ace was dangerous. Ethan knew that. But something about her stillness, her quiet strength, unnerved him in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Ace growled low. Not a warning, more like a reminder. "I'm still watching. Don't come closer." But Lily didn't flinch. She slowly began to hum. Not a full song, not words, just a breath of melody, soft and familiar. It was "You Are My Sunshine." Ethan froze. He hadn't heard that tune in 3 years. Not since Megan used to sing it on stormy nights to calm Ace down when thunder rattled the windows. That song had been his wife's favorite. Now here it was again, drifting from a 10-year-old girl who had no way of knowing its meaning. Ace's ears twitched. He stopped pacing. His growl faded, almost like it was being pulled backward in time. Lily reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the bear, and slowly pushed it forward across the concrete. "For you," she whispered, "so you know someone cares." Ace tilted his head. He didn't move for a long time, but then slowly, inch by inch, he crept forward, nose twitching, eyes wary. He sniffed the bear, and then he sat. Ethan couldn't breathe. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was the first sign of something he hadn't seen in months. A choice. Ace had chosen not to attack. He'd chosen to stay. That night, the house felt different, lighter, less haunted. Lily sat by the fireplace in one of Megan's oversized sweaters, sipping hot cocoa. She was still shivering from her time in the basement, but her eyes were bright with a quiet joy Ethan didn't understand. "You shouldn't have taken off the vest," he said, handing her a thick blanket. "We had safety protocols for a reason." "He needed to see my face," she replied. "If I look like everyone else who's hurt him, he never would have come near me." Ethan didn't argue. She was right. He sat across from her and picked up a picture of Megan from the side table. Her eyes still smiled at him, even though the memory stung. "That song," he said quietly. "My wife used to sing it to Ace. During storms, she swore it calmed him down." Lily looked up. Then maybe she taught it to him better than anyone else could. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stayed up watching old videos of Megan and Ace playing in the snow. Ace had once been so gentle, so goofy, chasing tennis balls like a puppy, rolling over for belly rubs. That version of the dog seemed like a ghost now. But the way he'd sat in front of Lily, it wasn't just a reflex, it was recognition. The next morning, Lily was already downstairs before Ethan had even finished his coffee. She stood outside the enclosure again, bundled in 2 jackets this time. "Let me go in alone," she said, "like yesterday." Ethan hesitated. "You got lucky yesterday." "I wasn't lucky. He made a choice. I just gave him space to do it." He radioed Sheriff Pierce and had a paramedic on standby again. The safety team protested. The footage from the last attack still gave them nightmares. But Lily entered the enclosure anyway. This time Ace didn't growl. He stayed in the corner, eyes locked on her, but the warning wasn't there. Lily sat, just like before, but she didn't sing this time. She pulled a sandwich from her coat pocket, unwrapped half of it, and began to eat slowly, making a show of how calm she was. Then she slid the other half toward Ace on a paper napkin. The smell of turkey and cheese must have cut through whatever fog held him. His body shifted slightly, head low, eyes alert. Ace didn't rush. He approached with agonizing caution, step by step, sniffing the floor, then the sandwich. Then in one clean motion, he ate it. "Good boy," Lily whispered, more breath than sound. Ace looked up. Their eyes met for the first time. He didn't retreat. Word got out faster than Ethan expected. By day 3, news vans were parking at the end of the private drive, trying to get footage of the $1 million dog. Reporters speculated whether Ethan had finally lost it. Some claimed he was exploiting a child. Others accused him of playing PR games. But most just wanted the story. Sheriff Pierce visited the estate that evening, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "You're creating a circus, Ethan," he warned, "and it could blow up in your face." "I don't care," Ethan said. "If there's even a chance she can reach him, it's worth the noise." The sheriff sighed. "That dog nearly took a man's arm off. I like you, but I've got a town to protect." "I get it, but that girl's doing something none of your experts could." Pierce didn't argue. He glanced toward the security monitor and watched Lily hand-feed Ace slices of apple through the enclosure gate. "You're betting your dog's life on a kid." "No," Ethan said. "I'm betting my wife's last wish on a second chance." Day 4 brought snow, thick and heavy, blanketing the grounds in white. Lily asked for a CD player, something old school. She said Ace needed more than food. He needed music. She dug through the shelves in the study and found one of Megan's old discs. When the first notes of "You Are My Sunshine" echoed through the basement, Ace lifted his head immediately. His tail thumped once, just once, but it was enough. Lily sat cross-legged and began to sing along, soft and off-key, but full of feeling. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." Ace came closer, laid down at her feet, and stayed. By day 5, Ethan started to believe again. He watched them through the glass, girl and dog, connected by something stronger than words, something ancient and sacred, like forgiveness. Ace hadn't growled in 2 days. He responded to Lily's commands, even rolled onto his side when she scratched behind his ears. Ethan brought her dinner in the living room that night, mac and cheese and warm bread, and she ate with the hunger of someone who hadn't had a real meal in a long time. "I don't think he's broken," she said between bites. "I think he's scared and sad, like he doesn't think anyone loves him anymore." Ethan swallowed hard. "That's how I've felt for the last 2 years." Lily looked up. "Then maybe you need healing too." He didn't answer, but something in his chest shifted. Not much, just enough to notice. By the time the 6th day arrived, Ace was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. No pacing, no growling, no howling at shadows. Ethan stood at the glass and watched Lily stroke his fur as the dog snored softly in her lap. He turned to the security guard beside him. "Can you believe this?" The guard shook his head. "Honestly, sir, no, I can't." And neither could Ethan. But for the first time since the avalanche, he wanted to. By the end of the first week, the impossible was starting to feel routine. Every morning, Lily descended the basement steps like it was her job. Boots crunching against the stone, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands, her father's old stuffed bear tucked under one arm. She didn't flinch at the buzz of the security lock or the clang of the heavy steel door sealing behind her. She'd enter Ace's enclosure with a calm that belied her age and sit cross-legged on the floor, legs stiff against the cold. Some days she sang, other days she talked. Mostly she just was, present, steady, and somehow that was enough. Ace would want to hear her in silence for a while, then inch closer. By day 7, he no longer hesitated. He'd meet her at the center of the room, tail low but no longer tucked, ears alert but relaxed. He sniffed the bear now as if it were his too. When she patted her lap, he rested his head there, closing his eyes like he was finally learning how to breathe again. Ethan Rowe couldn't wrap his head around it. From the observation window, he'd stare through the thick glass, arms folded, unsure whether to feel awe or guilt. No amount of training, money, or science had reached the dog that now lay sleeping like a child in Lily's lap. All it had taken, apparently, was patience and heartbreak. That Sunday, the first visitor arrived. He came in a blue Volvo that looked too clean for a mountain road. Mid-50s, blazer over a sweater, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed. Introduced himself as Dr. Victor Hale, a behavioral psychologist who'd worked with trauma patients, both human and canine, for over 2 decades. "I saw the video Ethan posted," he said as he stepped into the foyer, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Heard about what's happening here. I'd like to help." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You drove all the way out here just to offer your services?" "I'd say I ran out here." Hale smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Cases like this don't come around often. The girl, the dog, the stakes, it's all very compelling." Ethan hesitated. He didn't like strangers, especially not ones who smelled like opportunity. "We've already made progress," he said carefully. "More than anyone expected. That's exactly why I came. Progress this fast is rare, but it's also fragile. With respect, Miss Rowe, what happens if she gets hurt?" The question hit like a punch. Ethan had asked himself that 100 times. He glanced toward the security monitors where Lily was feeding Ace tiny strips of leftover meatloaf from a paper plate. The dog was eating slowly, calmly, watching her with soft eyes and no sign of tension in his posture. Still, Ethan felt a chill. "I just want to observe for now," Hale offered. "No interference, no pressure. Let me sit in on a session or two. I'll stay out of her way." Against his better judgment, Ethan agreed. On day 8, Lily noticed the man with the notebook standing behind the glass wall. "Who's that?" she asked. "Dr. Hale," Ethan said through the intercom. "Just an observer." "Is he a vet?" "No, behavior specialist." Lily turned back to Ace, who stood by her side, head tilted, his ears perked toward the glass. "He smells like someone who wants control," she said flatly. Ethan blinked. "What does that mean?" "I don't know." She scratched behind Ace's ear. "He just smells wrong." She said it with the casual confidence of someone who trusted her gut more than she trusted grown-ups. Dr. Hale chuckled when Ethan relayed the comment later that night. "Kids say the darndest things," he said, sipping tea in the library. "Still, you can't deny the girl has instincts. But instinct needs boundaries." "She's doing fine without yours," Ethan said. Hale smiled again. Still didn't reach his eyes. Day 9 brought a change in the rhythm. Ace was more alert that morning, ears rigid, shoulders tight, as if something had unsettled him overnight. Lily noticed immediately. "You okay, boy?" she whispered, kneeling down. He didn't retreat, but he didn't lean in either. She tried singing. He stayed still. She tried the stuffed bear. He looked at it, but didn't move. That's when Hale's thermos slipped from his hand in the observation room and clattered against the metal chair leg. The sharp clang echoed through the basement like a gunshot. Ace flinched, but that wasn't what changed everything. It was the scent that followed. The thermos lid had cracked open, spilling warm liquid across the floor. Within seconds, the air filled with the distinct aroma of bergamot and cedar. Ethan's stomach dropped, the same cologne worn by the rescue team the night Megan died. The same scent that had triggered Ace's attack on the last trainer. Inside the enclosure, Ace's entire body went rigid. His pupils dilated, mouth opening into a snarl that hadn't surfaced in days. His breath shortened, his tail dropped. The growl returned, not defensive, but deep, guttural, and dangerous. Lily froze. She didn't scream, didn't run. She simply dropped to the floor, low and calm like her father once taught her. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's just a smell. You're safe." But Ace wasn't hearing her. He was seeing something else. Snow, screams, light flashing off ice. Megan buried beneath 20 feet of powder. Men shouting, restraints, needles, her voice calling his name. The growl became a bark, loud, sharp, and then he lunged. Lily dove sideways just as Ace's massive weight struck where she had been kneeling. His jaws snapped air. His paws skidded across the floor, claws scraping against the concrete. From behind the glass, alarm sounded. "Open the gate," Ethan yelled. "Tranquilizer ready," shouted the paramedic. But inside the enclosure, Lily didn't run. She didn't even move away. Instead, she stood and faced him. "Ace," she cried, voice cracking. "It's me, Lily." Ace froze. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, confusion, regret. He whimpered, high, pitiful. And then he backed into the corner, shaking, like he didn't know who he was anymore. Later that night, the house was quiet as a tomb. Lily sat at the dining table, an ice pack on her shoulder, a tear in her jacket where Ace had grazed her. She didn't cry. Not once. Grace called from Denver, furious and scared. "What are you doing, letting my daughter near that buang?" She yelled into the phone. "She wasn't supposed to be alone," Ethan said. "It was a fluke." "She's 10, Ethan. 10. She's not a miracle worker. She's a child." But Lily didn't see it that way. She sat beside Ace's enclosure hours later, despite protests, humming under her breath again. This time the notes were broken, uncertain. "You didn't mean it," she whispered. "It's okay to forget who you are sometimes." Ace didn't move, didn't eat, didn't even blink. He just laid there, a pile of muscle and sadness, tail limp behind him. That night, Ethan sat in the dark library, Megan's journal open on his lap. He hadn't read the last entry in months. The ink had faded, the pages yellowed with time. Ace is just like you, brave but broken. Loyal but lost. He won't make it without someone to love him. Really love him. That's what keeps us all alive, isn't it? Being seen. He closed the journal and looked toward the window. Snow was falling again. Tomorrow they'd start over. But tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had stirred the ghosts on purpose. And Dr. Hale's cologne still hung faintly in the hallway. For the next several days, something in Liam changed. He was still the same cop who brewed strong coffee at 5 a.m., the one who scraped the frost off his truck windshield like it owed him money, but there was a strange tightness behind his eyes now. A heaviness in the way he stood too long in the hallway outside his daughter's room, listening to the silence, and Shadow, his canine partner, his shadow in every sense of the word, sensed it. The German Shepherd had begun sleeping by the nursery door again, just like when Ellie was born. Liam hadn't told anyone about the smell. The scent that Shadow had picked up inside the nursery, the one that made his ears shoot up and his whole body go still. He didn't want to say it aloud because, once he did, it would become real. And real was the last thing he wanted. That evening, as golden sunlight filtered through the pine trees behind the house, Liam stood in the nursery holding a folded onesie. Ellie's name was stitched in tiny pink letters across the chest. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried in years. But his throat ached like it was being crushed from the inside. Shadow sat in the doorway, watching his handler with the calm intensity of a soldier who'd seen too much. Liam finally broke the silence. "We're missing something, bud. She didn't just disappear. She didn't just vanish into the wind." The dog's ears twitched. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He tossed, he turned. At 2:17 a.m., he found himself staring at the baby monitor, even though it had been silent for weeks. Just the usual static, just nothing. But then something blinked, a flicker on the screen, a short glitch, almost imperceptible, like a second of movement, then gone. He sat up, heart pounding, rewound the footage. Nothing. But that was the thing about these kinds of cases. When something felt wrong, it usually was. By morning, Liam had made up his mind. They were going to search the house again. Not just search it, tear it apart. He didn't call the precinct. He didn't want to make this a circus. He trusted only two people with what he was about to do. Deputy Rachel Keller and, of course, Shadow. Rachel arrived just after sunrise with a toolbox and a raised eyebrow. "You sure about this, Liam?" "Start with the floorboards," he said flatly. "Nursery first." Rachel hesitated, glancing around the room that hadn't changed since the investigation began. "We've been through this place a dozen times." Liam didn't blink. "Shadow picked up something, and I trust him more than anyone." Rachel gave a quiet nod and knelt down with a pry bar. The first few boards groaned in protest. Dust flew up in clouds. Underneath, insulation, some wiring, nothing unusual. But Shadow was pacing now, nose low, circling toward the far wall where a heavy oak dresser sat. His hackles rose. A deep, low growl rumbled from his chest. Liam moved quickly, dragging the dresser aside. Beneath it, floorboards warped in a subtle crescent, barely visible. Rachel knelt again, ran a hand over the wood, and froze. "This one's hollow." They pried it open. The scent hit Liam instantly. Old, musky, not quite death, but close. Mold? Decay? No, it was something off. Not strong, not fresh, but wrong. Inside the cavity was a space no bigger than a shoebox. It was empty, except for a single blue pacifier with Ellie's initials on it. Liam stared, hand trembling as he lifted the object. "She never used a pacifier, never liked them. We didn't buy this." Rachel's voice was hushed. "Then where the hell did it come from?" Shadow whined low, circling the spot. His tail was stiff, nose twitching. They kept digging. Behind the wall where a built-in bookshelf used to be, Rachel found old insulation that crumbled like paper. Behind that, an air duct that had been modified, rerouted at some point. It led to a crawl space between the walls, a narrow one, almost too small for a child. But not quite. Liam's stomach turned. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Rachel gave a short nod. "This wasn't about abduction. Someone built a hiding space inside your own damn house." They crawled through the wall like miners. Shadow led the way, paws padding silently on dust-coated beams. It wasn't long before they hit a section of drywall that had clearly been patched. From the outside, it was seamless, invisible. From the inside, it was sloppy work. Liam ripped it open with a crowbar. On the other side, another small room. Hidden, windowless, padded with soundproofing foam. It was no bigger than a closet. A child's shoe sat in the corner. A flashlight revealed something else. Scratch marks on the walls. Tiny ones, dozens of them. Liam's voice cracked. "She was in here." Shadow barked once sharply. Rachel covered her mouth with a shaking hand. They called the lab team. Within an hour, techs were in full gear collecting samples. Blood traces, hair fibers, enough to confirm what they already knew. Ellie had been hidden, held here, by someone who had keys to the house. Someone who knew when the cameras weren't rolling. Someone who wanted them to think she was gone. When the reports came back, the hair samples didn't match any family member. They matched a man from the registry, Frank Delaney, a licensed HVAC contractor who'd worked on the Hollis home 6 months prior when they installed new central air. He had access, he had blueprints, and he had a criminal record that somehow hadn't flagged because it was sealed under a juvenile offense. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And Liam understood it now. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a game, one they'd only just begun playing. By the time Liam turned the corner into the narrow hallway, the air had shifted. It was thicker somehow, closer. Shadow halted beside him, ears forward, body stiff, the kind of posture that said, "Don't move just yet." Liam knew that look. The shepherd wasn't reacting to noise or scent alone. He was reading something deeper, something off. They stood at the mouth of the hallway for a few more seconds, the silence pressing in around them. The old floorboards beneath their feet creaked with every inch they moved. On the wall to their left hung a family photo, the Blakes all lined up on the front porch, frozen in time. Ellie's mother, Martha, wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her hands rested stiffly on her husband's shoulder. And Ellie, no older than 5 in the photo, stood slightly apart from them, her eyes wide, uncertain. That should have been the first sign. Liam ran his flashlight along the cracked drywall. Go on, Shadow, he whispered. The dog eased forward, nose skimming the floor, then slowly up toward the baseboards. They reached a door at the end of the hallway. Ellie's room. The frame was worn, paint peeling, but there were tiny stickers still stuck to it. A pink unicorn, a glittery blue heart. Shadow hesitated again. Liam reached for the handle. It was locked. He crouched down and looked closer. The frame had faint splinters around the edge, as if someone had screwed it shut and later tried to force it open. That didn't sit right. He turned, eyeing the rest of the hallway. Across from Ellie's room was a linen closet. He opened it. Sheets, towels, nothing unusual, but Shadow kept glancing back toward Ellie's door. Yeah, Liam muttered. I feel it too. He radioed in. Unit 324, still on site, backroom locked from the outside. I need a warrant for forced entry, possible concealed evidence. Static cracked, followed by dispatch. Copy 324. Judge Keller just signed. Warrant confirmed for full search. Liam exhaled. Time to see what they didn't want us to find. The door gave after 2 hard shoves. It opened with a brittle crack, like the room had been holding its breath for years. The air was stale, colder than the rest of the house. A thick layer of dust coated everything. There were no sheets on the bed, no toys on the shelf, no signs of a child ever having lived there except for one thing. A small pair of pink slippers on the floor, toes pointed toward the closet. Shadow stepped inside and gave a low whine. Liam followed, careful not to disturb anything. The wallpaper, once covered in cartoon ponies, had faded to an almost colorless blur. But what chilled him was the closet. The door hung half open. He touched it lightly with his boot, swinging it the rest of the way. Inside, the back panel was missing. In its place, a rough-cut tunnel had been carved through the wall into the crawl space between the studs. Just large enough for a small child. Shadow barked sharply once and dove toward it. Hold, wait! Liam knelt, flashlight ready, peering into the hole. The space behind was barely more than 3 feet wide, but someone had dragged a blanket and pillow inside. There were crayon marks on the wood, a juice box moldy with time, and scrawled in childish handwriting on the drywall were the words, I'm not supposed to make noise. Liam's throat tightened. He backed out and turned to Shadow. Get sent, he said. Shadow sniffed the bedding, then moved back toward the room and began pacing. He was triangulating. Then he stopped dead, nose pointed at the far corner of the room where the floorboards changed slightly in color. Liam walked over and crouched. The boards weren't flush. He pried one up gently and saw the outline of a trap door. With slow care, he lifted it open. The smell hit him first. Damp, mold, and something that curdled the blood. Shadow didn't growl. He whimpered and backed away. Inside the crawl space, beneath Ellie's floor, lay a discarded box. Liam opened it and froze. It was full of little drawings, all done in crayon, stick figures with big eyes. One drawing showed Ellie holding hands with a dog. Another showed a man, her father, judging by the clothes, standing beside a large X. But what drew Liam's attention most was a page, torn and folded neatly, with writing far too precise for a child. If she talks, she goes away. Westbound. Liam stood in the backyard 20 minutes later, gloves off, elbows resting on the fence. He couldn't shake the smell, the silence of that hidden space under the floor. Shadow sat at his side, leaning gently against his leg, grounding him. Martha Blake was in cuffs, sitting in the back of the cruiser. She hadn't said a word since the second door was opened, but her eyes had gone dead the moment they found the crawl space. Not fear, not guilt. Resignation. Deputy Renner approached from the side. The neighbor's finally talking, he said. Said Ellie used to sneak out the side window. Said she always looked hungry, dirty too. But when they asked, she said her parents just didn't like noisy kids. Liam nodded slowly. And no one reported it. Renner exhaled. They figured she was just odd. You know how it is. Yeah, he knew. The kind of town where people only looked long enough to feel relieved it wasn't their kid. And the Blakes? Church-going, clean yards, steady jobs. No one wanted to believe something foul could fester behind vinyl siding. CSI found drag marks near the woodshed, Renner continued. That's where the dog led us next. Shadow stood, ears up, his eyes locked on the shed behind the house. Liam didn't need more. He followed Shadow through the uncut grass, through the broken gate to the back of the shed. There, behind the rotted paneling, was a cold storage freezer. Unplugged. Liam's stomach turned before he even opened it. Inside were scraps of fabric, bones, a small shoe, but no body, just a chilling absence. A child's ghost in the shape of missing pieces. Anya. They worked through the night. By morning, the yard was lit up with crime scene tape, forensics teams, and local media trucks. No sign of Ellie's remains yet, but the evidence was mounting. Diaries, recordings, even a confession scribbled in one of Martha's old notebooks. Blaming the curse, blaming Ellie's father, blaming everything but herself. Liam stood over the crawl space one last time. The drawings, the secret tunnel, the slippers. Shadow lay nearby, his tail unmoving. "We'll find her," Liam said quietly, "wherever she is." But even as he said it, he knew. Some scars don't fade. Some stories don't end clean. Not in places like this. The lake was no longer still. A sliver of golden light crept through the thick mist over Halberd Lake as divers prepared their equipment. Officer Liam Hollis stood at the water's edge, Gleich, eyes locked on the surface where his K9 partner, Shadow, had tracked the scent. The lake, drained of beauty by the weight of what lay beneath, held its breath. 15 feet from shore, the tip of a rusted car antenna jutted through the weeds like a crooked finger. Shadow's vest was soaked from the earlier search, but the German Shepherd still paced at Liam's side, ears perked and nose twitching in the crisp October air. There was no doubt in Liam's mind. His partner had found something terrible. When the dive team finally surfaced, dragging a tangle of straps behind them, the weight of the discovery hit like a freight train. Two small bodies, seat-belted, motionless, still clothed in Halloween costumes that had long since faded beneath the water. A skeleton in a Spider-Man hoodie. Another in a purple princess dress. Both children had been missing for 3 years. The town of Elkridge had wept for them. Now it would weep again. The coroner would later confirm what everyone already knew. They drowned in the back seat, windows sealed, the car rolled in reverse into the lake. No skid marks, no evidence of braking, just silence. Deliberate silence. Liam's hand rested gently on Shadow's shoulder. "You did good, boy," he whispered, barely audible. But Shadow didn't wag his tail. He didn't bark in celebration. He simply sat, stone still, watching the shoreline where a crowd had started to gather. One of the deputies threw up in the reeds. The car was registered to a woman named Janet Maris, a single mother. The town remembered her well. She'd vanished without a trace with her 2 kids. The case had gone cold after months of searching. Rumors had floated. Maybe she'd run, maybe she'd had help, but nothing had stuck. Until now, the license plate was a perfect match, but there was a problem. There was no adult body in the car, no driver's seat occupant, and that changed everything. The dive team ran another sweep, combing through the weeds and muck. Liam watched the sonar data scroll by, his stomach knotting tighter with every empty blip. He didn't want to believe it, but the theory was writing itself. Someone had buckled those kids in. Someone had left the car to roll. Someone who wasn't Janet Maris. And now someone who might still be walking free. That night, Liam sat at his desk long after everyone else had gone home. The scent from Shadow's vest still lingered in the air. Wet fur, lake water, faint oil from the car. Shadow lay curled near the heater, restless in his sleep, letting out muffled whines. Liam pulled out the old case file, photos of Janet and her kids, school pictures, social worker notes, a police report marked in red ink, presumed voluntary disappearance. He flipped it over. On the back, a scribbled note from the original investigator. No signs of domestic abuse. No custody battle. Neighbors say boyfriend didn't live there full time. Boyfriend? That word lit up in Liam's mind like a flare. He opened the evidence index, scrolling through witness interviews until he found it. Name, Garrett Nels. Occupation, tow truck operator. Liam's hand stopped moving. He'd heard that name before, just last week. Garrett Nels had called in a tip about a strange smell near the lake's east ridge, the same day Shadow found the scent trail. Coincidence? He pulled the call logs. Garrett hadn't just called once. He'd called 3 times over the last 2 years, each time describing a weird feeling about the lake. Each time the dispatcher had noted it as non-urgent. Liam leaned back in his chair, heart thudding. What kind of man reports a weird smell from a lake he may have used to hide a crime? Shadow stirred, lifting his head. "You smell that too, Liam?" Liam murmured up. "The scent of guilt, maybe?" It was 3:12 a.m. when Liam knocked on the door of Garrett Nell's garage on Old Tannersville Road. The lights were still on. Music played inside. Old country, scratchy on the radio. the kind of soundtrack people use to drown their conscience. Garrett opened the door, bleary-eyed and in grease-stained jeans. His face twitched when he saw the badge. "What's this about?" he asked, rubbing his neck. Liam motioned to Shadow, who was already stepping forward, nose to the ground. "You called about the lake a while back," Liam said. "Said something didn't feel right. We found a car. You recognize this license plate?" He handed Garrett a photo of the vehicle. Garrett's reaction was immediate, but wrong. He didn't squint. He didn't look confused. He went pale. I didn't know it was them," he stammered. Liam didn't blink. "I never said who was in the car." A beat of silence passed. Then Garrett ran. He pushed off the door frame, vaulted over a stack of tires, and bolted toward the back entrance. Shadow barked once, sharp, focused, and lunged. His paws hit gravel like thunder. By the time Liam caught up, Garrett was on the ground, flat under Shadow's weight. The shepherd's teeth weren't clamped, but his growl left no room for argument. Liam yanked Garrett up and cuffed him, breathing hard. "You killed them?" he demanded. Garrett shook his head, shaking violently. "No, I didn't kill them. She said she was going to leave, said she was taking the kids and going to her sister's in Montana. She was going to tell them what I did, what I'd done before." "What did you do?" Liam asked coldly. Garrett didn't answer. Later, they'd learn Janet Maris had planned to report Garrett for domestic abuse and suspected involvement in another missing person case years before. She'd packed bags, booked bus tickets, but she never made it out of town. Her body wasn't in the car because she never got into it. Shadow had led them to the truth, but the pain of it, the sheer horror, was something no K-9 unit could fix. Days later at the town memorial, Liam stood silently in the back, Shadow beside him in a clean vest. A framed photo of the two children rested beside a bouquet of marigolds and a letter from their school teacher. The wind blew softly through the trees, and somewhere deep in the crowd, a quiet voice whispered, "They would have never been found if it weren't for that dog." But Liam knew better. It wasn't just the dog. It was the bond between a man and a creature that felt the world through scent, instinct, and something more ancient than words. It was trust. And sometimes trust is the only light in a story that begins in darkness. The courthouse was quiet except for the ticking of an old brass clock and the shuffling of papers. It had been 3 weeks since Garrett Nels was arrested, but the weight of the case hadn't lifted. If anything, it had grown heavier. Officer Liam Hollis sat across from Detective Rachel Kim in a small interview room, staring down at a manila folder marked recovered items, Maris vehicle. Inside were personal belongings pulled from the submerged car, a half-melted crayon box, a rusted lunchbox, a backpack with Sophie stitched on the strap, and in the bottom corner, a plastic bag containing a stack of water-damaged drawings. "Found these between the seats," Rachel said softly. "We had them dried and restored." Liam lifted the bag gently. Inside were 5 or 6 pages, childlike scribbles on faded construction paper. One showed a house with 3 smiling stick figures, a mom and 2 kids. Another had a die labeled Milo, the name of the family's golden retriever that had died before the disappearance. But it was the last drawing that made Liam's chest tighten. A car, sinking into blue scribbles. 2 children inside. And a man standing on shore, drawn in red crayon. No face, just red. Rachel's voice was quiet. "Sophie drew that one. Must have been right before." Liam stared at the image, trying to shake off the chill crawling down his spine. That was no child's imagination. That was memory. Back at the station, Liam laid the drawing on his desk beside his notes. Shadow, his German Shepherd partner, rested nearby, his head on his paws. He hadn't left Liam's side all week. Something about this case had shaken the whole department, but the dog seemed to carry it deeper. Liam reached down and rubbed behind Shadow's ears. "You knew," he murmured, "long before we did." Shadow blinked slowly as if agreeing. Later that afternoon, Liam returned to the lake. The leaves had started to turn, painting the trees in bursts of amber and rust. The water shimmered, deceptively calm. No crime scene tape remained, no flashing lights, just the sound of birds overhead and the crunch of gravel under boots. He stopped at the exact spot where Shadow had frozen weeks ago. There was no scent now, but there was something else. In the reeds, just a few feet from the edge, Liam saw a strip of fabric fluttering. He knelt to retrieve it, an old hair ribbon, pink and stiff with lake residue. Carefully, he tucked it into his pocket. Evidence or not, it didn't feel right to leave it there. When he stood, he noticed Shadow had wandered up the hill toward a clearing near the tree line. The shepherd's body was tense, nose low, tail still. Liam followed. There, hidden behind a collapsed hunting blind, was a small pile of trash. Beer cans, crumpled receipts, a cheap cell phone. Liam pulled on gloves and examined it. One receipt was from a gas station in Fairview, dated 3 years ago, the exact week Janet and her kids disappeared. The clerk had written the name G. Nels at the top in blue pen. Liam exhaled slowly. This wasn't just a hiding spot. It was a place Garrett had returned to. Shadow let out a soft growl and stepped closer to the tree line. A moment later, Liam spotted it, half buried under pine needles and dirt, a shallow grave. The remains were skeletal, tattered clothing, long decayed. Dental records later confirmed it was Janet Maris. She had never left her kids. She died trying to save them. Back at the station, the medical examiner confirmed what Liam feared. Janet had suffered blunt force trauma to the back of the head. No water in the lungs. She was already gone before the car hit the lake. Liam sat in silence for a long time after the report was filed. Shadow lay beside him, still as a stone. In the coming days, the town of Elk Ridge erupted with grief. Memorials were held in the school gymnasium. Candlelight vigils lit up the sidewalks. Local newspapers published a photo of Janet and her children smiling in front of their old house. The caption read, "They were never forgotten." Garrett Nels pled guilty to all charges. But guilt didn't mend a town, and it didn't ease Liam's heart. What did help, strangely, was the drawing. The red man had a face now. The truth had come to light because a child drew what she couldn't say aloud, and because a dog refused to ignore what no one else could smell. One evening, a few weeks later, Liam visited the school where Sophie and Max used to attend. The principal had invited him to speak to the students during a special safety awareness day. He brought Shadow with him. The children were hesitant at first, some too young to understand, others too aware of what had happened. But when Shadow sat quietly in the center of the room, ears perked, tail gently wagging, the tension broke. Hands went up. Is he a real police dog? Does he bite bad guys? Can he smell buried treasure? Liam smiled. He smells things we can't. Secrets, danger, sometimes even truth. A little girl in the front row raised her hand. Did he find the kids? Liam nodded. Yes, he did. Later, after the talk, Liam sat alone outside the school, watching the sun dip below the tree line. Shadow sat beside him, leaning slightly into his leg. The golden light caught on the dog's fur, casting him in the same warm hue as the children's crayon drawings. Liam looked down and whispered, "You brought them home." There was no bark, no movement, just the quiet dignity of a dog who had done his duty. And in that moment, Liam understood something he'd never put into words before. Justice doesn't always roar in courtrooms. Sometimes it walks on four legs. Sometimes it's silent. And sometimes it comes with a paw pressed gently against your heart. Thank you for following this journey with us. What part of the story moved you most? Shadow's discovery, the children's drawing, or the final truth in the woods? Let us know your thoughts below. Your voice matters, and your reflection helps keep these stories alive.